She's not your daughter." The words were small, almost too soft for a room built to worship power, but they struck William Harrington so hard that his silver pen stopped less than an inch above the adoption papers. For one long second, nothing moved inside the 58th floor law office overlooking Manhattan. Rain slid down the glass walls in thin gray lines. Far below, yellow taxis crawled through traffic like sparks underwater. Around the conference table, polished adults in dark suits froze with practiced smiles still half-formed on their faces. The photographer lowered his camera. The social media consultant stopped whispering into her headset. Even the old grandfather clock near the mahogany shelves seemed to hesitate before its next tick. William Harrington, billionaire founder of Harrington Global, had signed contracts worth more than most cities' annual budgets without blinking. He had acquired companies, closed factories, opened research hospitals, and stood before senators with a face carved from calm. But now his hand trembled over a single page because a little black girl in a faded denim jacket had just said the one sentence no one in that room was prepared to hear. Her name was Naomi Brooks. She was 8 years old, small for her age, with neat braids tied at the ends by blue beads that clicked faintly whenever she moved. Her sneakers were clean but worn at the soles, and she held the strap of her old canvas backpack with both hands, as if it were keeping her anchored to the floor. A pale blue bracelet circled her wrist, frayed at the edges, its tiny metal charm tucked against her palm. She stood near the door where a junior assistant had told her to wait quietly while the adults handled things. But Naomi had not stayed quiet. Across the table sat Lily Monroe, the 9-year-old girl William was about to adopt. Lily wore a cream cardigan, a navy dress, and a white ribbon in her light brown hair. She looked like the photograph on the front of the adoption packet, gentle, polished, camera-ready. Yet after Naomi spoke, Lily's eyes dropped to her lap. Her fingers twisted together until her knuckles turned pale. Beside William, Victoria Sloan slowly turned her head. Victoria was elegant in the way expensive things were elegant. All-pearl earrings, smooth blonde hair, and a smile that never reached her eyes unless someone important was watching. She had arranged the private signing, the press release, the foundation announcement, even the soft lighting near the windows. The adoption, she had told William, would show the world that the Harrington name still meant family, compassion, and legacy. Now her smile sharpened. "Excuse me," she said, her voice light enough to sound polite and cold enough to change the temperature in the room. Naomi swallowed, but she did not look away from William. "She's not your daughter," she repeated. The second time, the words were clearer. William felt the room tilt around him. He looked at Lily, then at the papers in front of him, then at Naomi. The adoption document lay open to the final page, where his full legal name waited beneath a paragraph about permanent guardianship and parental rights. A dark bead of ink had already fallen from the tip of his pen, spreading on the signature line like a bruise. "Security," Victoria said softly, not taking her eyes off Naomi. "Please escort this child out." A man near the wall stepped forward, uncertain. Naomi's shoulders rose, but she held her ground. "Ask her," Naomi said. "Ask Lily what song your wife used to sing." The name of William's late wife was not spoken in that office. Not by staff. Not by lawyers. Not by Victoria. Eleanor Harrington had been gone for years, and William had built his grief into walls so high that even memory needed permission to enter. But the mention of her moved through him like cold air under a locked door. His gaze shifted back to Lily. The little girl's face had gone still. Not confused. Not offended. Afraid of answering wrong. Grace Holloway, William's longtime family attorney, sat near the end of the table with a folder resting beneath one wrinkled hand. She was 72, silver-haired, and usually unshakable. Now she was staring at Naomi's wrist. Not at the child's face. Not at the backpack. At the blue bracelet. "William," Grace said quietly. He did not respond. He was still hearing Naomi's question, still feeling the past press against the glass of the present. Eleanor used to sing in the kitchen when it rained. A soft old lullaby from her childhood in Savannah, barely above a hum, while she stirred tea or folded towels or stood barefoot by the window pretending she was not sad. William had forgotten the tune on purpose. Forgetting had been easier than surviving it. "That's enough," Victoria said, sharper now. "Naomi is from the same group home as Lily. She has had a difficult time adjusting. Children sometimes say dramatic things when they feel left behind. Naomi's eyes flicked toward Lily, and something tender crossed her face. I'm not trying to take anything from her, she said. She told me she didn't want to lie anymore. A murmur passed around the room, soft and nervous. The photographer took one step backward. The junior assistant looked at the floor. William set the pen down. The tiny sound of metal touching would traveled farther than it should have. Everyone stay where you are, he said. His voice was low, but it carried the force of a locked door closing. Victoria leaned closer to him. William, think about what you're doing. This is an emotional moment. The press release is scheduled for 4 o'clock. The board already knows. The foundation donors are expecting. I said stay where you are. This time, even Victoria went silent. William rose slowly from his chair. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it seemed almost armored. But when he stepped away from the table, he did not look like a man in command of an empire. He looked like a man walking toward a memory he had spent years trying not to meet. He approached Naomi carefully, stopping several feet away so he would not crowd her. Up close, he saw that she was breathing fast but standing straight. Brave, he thought, then hated himself for being surprised by it. What is your name? He asked, though he already knew it from Victoria's explanation. Naomi Brooks. Naomi, he said, and the name felt strangely familiar in his mouth, though he could not place why. Why did you say that? Naomi looked past him to Lily. Lily's eyes were wet now, though she made no sound. Naomi tightened her fingers around the strap of her backpack. Because grown-ups keep signing papers and calling it truth, she said. But paper can lie. The room went so quiet that William could hear the rain tapping against the windows. Grace closed her eyes for half a second, as if those words had confirmed something she feared. Victoria gave a small laugh, polished and brittle. This is absurd. William, she is 8. Naomi lifted her wrist. The blue bracelet slipped down, revealing the tiny charm. It turned in the gray light, and William saw 2 letters engraved on the back. YH. His breath stopped. He knew that bracelet. Not from a photograph. Not from a report. From Eleanor's wrist. She had worn it on rainy days, on hospital visits, on the morning she told him that love was not something a person owned, but something a person protected. William reached out, then caught himself before touching it. Where did you get that? He whispered. Naomi's chin lifted. It was in the box they told me never to open. Behind him, Lily began to cry quietly. Not the loud kind of crying adults could dismiss as drama, but the silent kind that made every honest person in the room ashamed. William turned, and for the first time since entering that office, he truly looked at both children. Not as documents, not as decisions, not as symbols of legacy or damage control, as children standing in the middle of a story the adults had arranged around them without asking what the truth had cost. The adoption papers remained open on the table, waiting for his signature. The ink stain had spread across the line where his name was supposed to go. William looked at Victoria, then at Grace, then finally at Naomi. No one leaves, he said, and no one signs anything until I know why my wife's bracelet is on your wrist. William did not raise his voice, and that frightened the room more than anger would have. The people around the conference table knew how to respond to anger. They knew how to calm it, excuse it, redirect it, and wrap it in professional language. But this silence, this steady stillness in William Harrington's face, gave them nothing to manage. The rain kept sliding down the windows behind him, turning Manhattan into a blurred wall of silver and gray. Naomi stood where she was, one hand still guarding the blue bracelet, as if the little charm had a heartbeat. Lily sat across the table with her shoulders folded inward, staring at the adoption papers as though the ink itself had accused her. Victoria Sloane was the first to move. She stepped between William and Naomi with the smooth confidence of someone used to entering a room and owning its air. William, she said, lowering her voice into something soft and careful. This is exactly why I asked that the children not be brought into the signing room until after everything was finished. This is overwhelming for them. Naomi is confused. Lily is scared. We should not turn a child's outburst into an investigation. Naomi flinched at the word outburst, but she did not step back. William noticed. He noticed everything now. The way Naomi kept her eyes on the floor when adults spoke over her. The way Lily looked at Victoria before every breath, as if she needed permission even to be afraid. She did not have an outburst, William said. She answered a question no one else was willing to ask. Victoria's smile tightened. She made an accusation. Then we will examine it. Against a child, William. Against Lily. Is that really what you want this moment to become? At that, Lily's face crumpled. Naomi looked at her quickly, almost protectively. I am not blaming her, Naomi said. Her voice was small but clear, like a match struck in a dark room. She did not make the lie. She was put inside it. Grace Holloway slowly removed her reading glasses and set them beside her folder. The old attorney's hand was not steady. William saw that too. For 20 years, Grace had handled the Harrington family's most private storms with the calm of a church bell. Now she looked as if the floor beneath her had shifted. Grace, William said, look at the bracelet. Grace hesitated, then rose from her chair and walked toward Naomi. She did not reach for the child. She simply lowered herself slightly, careful and respectful, until she could see the charm. Naomi watched her the way a child watches a doctor before deciding whether the needle is coming. Grace's lips parted. Where did you say you found this, sweetheart? In the box under my bed, Naomi said. At the home? Grace asked. Naomi nodded. Miss Carla said it came with me when I was little. She said I should not show it around because people take things that look important. A faint sound moved through the room. Someone near the window whispered, then stopped. William felt the back of his throat tighten. Who is Miss Carla? She runs the place on Staten Island, Naomi said. Not the big office. The smaller house with the green porch. Victoria let out another quiet laugh, but there was less polish in it now. This is impossible. An old bracelet in a group home does not prove anything. Charms are copied all the time. Initials mean nothing. Eleanor Harrington was a public figure. There were photographs. There were charity events. Anyone could have seen something like that. Then why are you shaking? Naomi asked. The question was so simple that no one breathed for a second. Victoria looked down at her own hands, then curled them neatly around the edge of the table. I am not shaking. But she was. Only a little. Enough. William turned away from her and walked back to the table. The adoption packet was still open. He lifted the top page, then the next, scanning names, dates, signatures, sealed stamps, agency letters, background summaries. It all looked clean. Too clean. Like a house staged for sale, every personal thing hidden before strangers arrived. Grace, he said, who verified Lily's file? The agency sent certified copies, Grace answered carefully. I reviewed what was provided. Victoria cut in, and everything was approved. William, you know this. We went through months of due diligence. Medical review, guardianship review, identity review. There is nothing here except fear and confusion. Naomi took one small step forward. The beads in her braids clicked softly. Ask her the song, she said again. William looked at Lily. He hated himself for how long it took. The child was not a suspect. She was a little girl surrounded by adults who had placed her under lights and expectations until the truth felt dangerous. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, making himself lower, quieter. Lily, he said gently, you are not in trouble. Lily pressed her lips together. Mr. Harrington, I tried to remember everything. The words landed like a dropped glass. Victoria's head snapped toward her. Lily, honey, you do not need to say anything. Let her speak, William said. Lily's eyes filled again. They said if I got it right, you would be happy. They said you had been sad for a long time and needed a daughter who fit the story. Naomi's face tightened, but she stayed silent. William felt the room recede around him until only Lily's trembling voice remained. What story? He asked. Lily looked at Victoria, then at the table. The one about your wife. The rain. The song. The bracelet. The hospital. Grace put a hand over her mouth. Victoria stood very still. William could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He remembered Eleanor at a hospital window, rain on the glass, humming softly while she held a paper cup of tea she never drank. He remembered being too busy on a call to ask why she looked afraid. He remembered losing her before he ever understood the fear. What song did they tell you? He asked. Lily shook her head, crying harder now, but still quietly. I do not know it. I only know the words they wrote down. I practiced them, but I could not make it sound right. Naomi's voice came from behind him. Because it was not hers to sing. William turned. Naomi had taken the blue bracelet off. She held it in both hands, offering it not as proof, but as something heavy and sacred. Miss Carla said I hummed that song when I was little, she said. Before I knew words. The air changed. Even Victoria seemed to understand that the room had passed beyond denial. William reached for the bracelet, then stopped again, letting Naomi decide whether to place it in his palm. After a moment, she did. The charm was warm from her skin. The engraved letters caught the gray afternoon light. William closed his hand around it and felt, for the first time in years, not the clean pain of grief, but the sharper pain of having missed something. Living. Grace, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Pull every original record. Not copies. Originals. Grace nodded. Yes. Call the agency. Call the hospital. Call the home on Staten Island. He looked at Lily, then at Naomi. And get these children somewhere quiet, with food, away from cameras. Victoria stepped toward him. William, you are making a mistake. He looked at her then, fully. No, he said. I made one before I picked up the pen. Grace Holloway moved faster than anyone expected from a woman with silver hair and a pearl brooch pinned to her navy jacket. The moment William gave the order, she gathered the folders from the conference table, tucked the original adoption packet under her arm, and led Naomi and Lily out of the signing room before Victoria could turn the silence into another performance. They walked down a carpeted hallway where framed photographs of past Harrington charity galas lined the walls, all candlelight, black ties, and smiling donors. Naomi glanced at the pictures, but said nothing. Lily walked beside her with both hands wrapped around the sleeves of her cardigan, her steps careful, as if she was afraid the building itself might ask her another question. William followed a few feet behind them, carrying Eleanor's bracelet in his closed hand. He could feel the tiny charm pressing into his palm, small as a raindrop and heavier than any contract he had ever signed. At the end of the hallway, Grace opened a private lounge usually reserved for clients who needed a quiet place before court. There were soft gray couches, a low table, a window facing the East River, and a small kitchenette with bottled water, fruit, and wrapped sandwiches on a marble counter. It was too clean, too expensive, too quiet, but it was away from cameras, away from the waiting press release, and away from Victoria's voice. Sit anywhere you like, Grace said gently. Lily chose the edge of the couch closest to the door. Naomi stayed standing until William stepped back and gave her space. Then she sat beside Lily without touching her. That small choice struck him. Naomi had not come to accuse Lily. She had placed herself beside her. Grace handed each girl a bottle of water and a turkey sandwich cut into neat halves. Lily stared at hers as if permission might be withdrawn. Naomi nudged the plate slightly toward her. It is okay, she whispered. He said food. Lily looked at William, then at Grace, then picked up half the sandwich with both hands. William turned toward the window because the sight made something ache in him that he did not know how to name. 10 minutes ago, he had been prepared to sign a legal document and call it fatherhood. Now 2 children were teaching him the difference between being chosen and being handled. Grace stepped aside and made 3 phone calls in a low voice. First to the adoption agency, then to the family records office, then to St. Agnes Medical Center in Brooklyn, where Eleanor had volunteered years earlier and where, according to Lily's file, several key records had supposedly originated. Each call sharpened the air. Each pause made Victoria's absence feel louder. William stood near the kitchenette, listening to rain tap against the window when Naomi spoke. Are you going to send us back? The question was not dramatic. It was practical, like she had learned early that every room had an ending. William turned slowly. Not tonight. Naomi watched him with guarded eyes. Adults say that sometimes when they mean later. He accepted the correction without defense. I will not send either of you anywhere unsafe. And I will not let anyone make you repeat something you are afraid to say. Lily lowered the sandwich. I am not afraid of saying it, she whispered. I am afraid of what happens after. William moved to the chair across from them, not too close. Then we will go one question at a time. Grace returned from the hallway with her phone in one hand and her face pale beneath the office lights. William, she said, the agency says the case manager who certified Lily's identity left 6 weeks ago. They will not release her notes without a formal request. Send it. I already did. Grace looked at Naomi. And I reached Miss Carla at the Staten Island home. She remembers the box. Naomi sat straighter. She still has the papers? She says there were not many. Hey, hospital band, 2 photographs, and a note sealed in plastic. She was told they were personal effects and that they should stay with you. William's fingers tightened around the bracelet. Who told her? Grace's eyes moved briefly toward the closed door, as if Victoria could hear through walls. A private family liaison from the Harrington estate. The name on the delivery record was not familiar to her, but the authorization number was real. William felt the past opening in pieces. A private liaison. An authorization number. A box given to a child and buried beneath years of ordinary neglect. He had built systems to track shipments across oceans, patents across laboratories, and stock movements across time zones. But something that mattered had traveled through his own world without his knowledge. Lily looked at Naomi. I am sorry, she said suddenly. Naomi blinked. For what? For using your story. Naomi shook her head. You did not know it was mine. Lily's eyes filled again, but Naomi spoke before the tears could take over the room. Do you remember the lady who gave you the cards? Lily nodded, small and quick. William leaned forward. Cards. Lily wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. Index cards. With things to learn. Favorite color. Favorite song. A story about rain. What to say if someone asked about the bracelet. William's chest tightened. What were you supposed to say? Lily hesitated. Naomi placed her water bottle down with quiet care. You can say it. I am not mad. Lily took a shaky breath. I was supposed to say my mother gave it to me before she went to heaven. The room went still again, but this silence was different from the conference room. There was no spectacle in it now. Only the terrible weight of adults using beautiful words to cover ugly choices. William closed his eyes for 1 second. Eleanor would have hated that sentence. Not because it spoke of loss, but because it turned loss into a tool. Grace's phone buzzed. She looked down, then drew in a sharp breath. The first hospital. Response came in. St. Agnes has no record of Lily Monroe under the file number listed in the adoption packet. William looked up. And Naomi? Grace read silently, her thumb trembling as she scrolled. There is a protected record under a different name. Female infant. Approximately 8 months old at intake. Brought in during a storm. Temporary guardian listed as Eleanor Harrington. The room seemed to lose all sound. Naomi stared at Grace as if the words had come from far away. Lily covered her mouth with both hands. William could not move. 8 months old. During a storm. Eleanor as guardian. The rain against the glass became thunder in his memory, though outside it was only a steady New York drizzle. What name? He asked. Grace looked at Naomi, then back at William, her eyes wet now. The child was admitted as Nora Grace. Naomi's lips parted. That is not my name. No, Grace said softly. But it may have been the name someone gave you before Naomi. William opened his palm. The blue bracelet lay there, its charm shining under the lounge light. Yach. He remembered Eleanor saying once that if love ever arrived in a way the world did not understand, the only decent thing to do was protect it until the world caught up. He had smiled then, distracted, barely listening. Now those words returned with the force of a door opening. Naomi stood slowly. Did she know me? William looked at the bracelet, then at the little girl in front of him, and for the first time all afternoon, his voice broke. I think she may have been trying to protect you. The name Nora Grace stayed in the lounge like a candle no one dared to blow out. Naomi did not sit back down. She stood beside the low table with the untouched second half of her sandwich near her hand, her eyes fixed on Grace, as if the older woman might say one more sentence that would make everything make sense. Lily remained on the couch, knees together, hands folded so tightly in her lap that William almost asked her to relax, then stopped himself. Children did not relax because adults told them to. They relaxed when the room became safe. And this room was not safe yet. It was only quieter than the last one. William turned to Grace. Bring Victoria in. Grace hesitated. Here, William said. Not the conference room. No cameras. No assistants. No lawyers speaking for her. Grace looked at Naomi and Lily. The girls should not have to hear an adult argument. Naomi spoke before William could answer. I want to hear. Her voice was not loud, but it had a steadiness that made William turn. Naomi, he said carefully, you do not owe anyone more courage today. I know. She touched the place on her wrist where the bracelet had been. But if people talk about me like I am not in the room, they can make anything sound clean. Grace looked down. William felt that sentence pass through him and leave something change behind. He nodded once. Then you stay as long as you want. If you want to leave, you leave. Lily looked at Naomi, then whispered, "Can I stay too?" William softened his voice. "Yes, the same rule applies." Grace went to the door. Less than a minute later, Victoria entered with her phone in one hand and a white coat draped over her arm, as if she had already decided the meeting was over and everyone else simply needed to catch up. Her face was composed again. The tremor in her hands was gone. She looked first at William, then at Grace, then at the two children on the couch. "This is inappropriate," she said. "A private family matter should not be turned into a courtroom for minors." "Then stop performing," Naomi said. Victoria's eyes moved to her slowly. For a second, something cold and unguarded showed beneath the elegance. Then the smile returned. "Naomi, sweetheart, adults are trying to help." "No," Naomi said. "Adults are trying to decide which parts of the truth are useful." William almost closed his eyes. Eleanor would have liked this child. Maybe Eleanor had loved her. The thought was too large to hold, so he set it aside and focused on the woman in front of him. "St. Agnes has no file for Lily under the number in the packet," he said. Victoria blinked once. Only once. Administrative errors happen. They found a protected record for an infant admitted during a storm. Eleanor was listed as temporary guardian. "That does not concern this adoption." Grace's voice cut in, calm but firm. "It concerns the documents used to support it." Victoria turned to her. "Grace, with respect, you are letting sentiment cloud procedure." Grace lifted the adoption packet. "Procedure is exactly what concerns me. These copies are missing chain of custody records. The agency certification references a case manager who is no longer employed. The hospital number belongs to no valid Lily Monroe file. And now we have a child in this room wearing Eleanor Harrington's bracelet." "A bracelet is not a birth certificate," Victoria said. "No," William replied. "But neither is a story memorized from index cards." Lily flinched, not from fear of him, but from the truth being spoken aloud. William saw it and immediately lowered his tone. "Lily, that was not your fault." Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed down. Victoria sighed as if exhausted by everyone else's weakness. "You are all letting one frightened little girl unravel months of work. Lily deserves stability. William deserves a family. The foundation deserves a human story after everything the company has endured this year. I made sure the process moved smoothly because you were too buried in grief to make decisions." The room went very still. There it was. Not an admission, not exactly, but a door left open. William stared at her. "You made sure?" Victoria looked away for the first time. "I coordinated with agencies. I protected you from complications." "What complications?" She said nothing. Grace stepped closer. "Victoria, did you know Lily was being coached? Children are prepared for major transitions all the time." "With false memories?" Grace asked. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Do not twist my words." Naomi stepped forward, small enough that the adults could have dismissed her and brave enough that none of them did. "Why did the lady tell Lily to say the bracelet was hers?" Victoria looked down at her. "Because sometimes a symbol helps a child feel connected. But it was not hers. It was going to be." Lily finally lifted her head. Her voice came out thin but clear. "You said if I did not remember it right, he might send me back." Victoria froze. William turned sharply, not in anger toward Lily, but in shock at what the child had carried alone. "Lily," he said gently, "no one here is sending you back because you told the truth." Lily's eyes filled. "You promised it would be okay if I became the right daughter," she whispered to Victoria. The word right seemed to break something invisible in the room. Naomi moved closer to Lily, not touching her, just near enough to make sure she was not alone. Grace's face hardened in a way William had rarely seen. "Victoria," Grace said, "who gave you Naomi's personal effects?" Victoria did not answer. Rain ticked against the glass. Somewhere in the hallway, an elevator chimed softly, normal life continuing outside the broken center of theirs. William took one step toward Victoria. "Who authorized the box to be delivered to the Staten Island home?" "I do not know." "That is not true. You cannot prove that." The words left her mouth too quickly. William heard it. Grace heard it. Naomi heard it too, because her eyes narrowed with the painful wisdom of a child who had learned that adults often revealed themselves by denying before being accused. Grace opened her phone and placed it on the table. "Miss Carla just sent a photograph of the delivery receipt." The liaison listed was Edmund Pike. William's face changed. Edmund Pike had been a Harrington family fixer years ago, a quiet man who handled private logistics after Eleanor's death. He had retired suddenly, or so William had been told. Victoria's expression faltered. That name means nothing to me. Grace tapped the screen. The authorization email was forwarded from your office. For the first time, Victoria had no smooth answer ready. She looked at William, then at the children, then back at William as if measuring how much truth he could survive. You were falling apart, she said quietly. Eleanor was gone. There were rumors, questions, unfinished arrangements. I contained them. William's voice dropped. You hit a child. Victoria's silence answered before her mouth did. Naomi's breath caught. Lily began to cry again, silently. William looked at Naomi, then at the bracelet in his hand, and the room seemed to pull away until all he could see was the little girl Eleanor may have tried to protect, standing under fluorescent office lights because the adults had failed her for years. No more containment, he said. No more image. No more prepared stories. Victoria whispered. William, think about the damage. He looked at both girls, then back at her. I am. Victoria did not leave the lounge with a dramatic exit. She left the way powerful people often retreated when the truth had become too bright, slowly, carefully, with her chin raised and her silence arranged like dignity. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and somehow that sound felt larger than all the words that had come before it. William stood facing the empty space where she had been, Eleanor's bracelet resting in his palm, while the rain softened against the windows and the city kept moving far below, as if nothing inside that room had changed. But everything had changed. Grace Holloway collected Victoria's phone records request, the adoption packet, and the photograph of Edmund Pike's delivery receipt, placing each item into a leather folder with the patience of someone building a bridge across a flood. Lily sat on the couch with her untouched water bottle in both hands. Naomi stood beside the low table, her face calm in the way children sometimes become calm when they are trying hard not to feel too much at once. William turned to them and understood, with a shame that settled deep in his chest, that the next wrong word from him could become another locked door in their lives. He had spent years believing money could create safety, but safety, he saw now, began with not making children carry adult fear. We are leaving this office, he said quietly. Not because we are hiding. Because neither of you should have to sit under these lights while adults clean up what adults broke. Naomi studied his face. Where are we going? Somewhere private. Somewhere warm. Grace will come with us. And Miss Carla will be called before any decision is made. Lily's voice barely rose above the rain. Am I in trouble with the agency? William shook his head at once. No. You told the truth. That is not trouble. Lily looked down. It feels like trouble. Grace crossed the room and lowered herself into the chair near Lily, careful to stay at eye level. It may feel frightening, she said, but telling the truth helps the right adults protect you. That is what should have happened from the start. Naomi looked at Grace with an expression William could not read. Hope, maybe, but hope with armor on it. A few minutes later, they moved through a private service hallway instead of the main lobby. William dismissed the photographer, canceled the press release, and told his chief of staff that every public announcement connected to the adoption was to be frozen immediately. No explanation. No replacement statement. No soft language. Frozen. The word followed him into the elevator as the doors closed around William, Grace, Naomi, and Lily. The elevator descended in silence, floor numbers glowing one by one above them. Naomi stood between the two girls, one hand gripping her backpack strap, the other wrist bare now without the bracelet. William noticed the pale mark where it had rested against her skin. It struck him that the bracelet had been with her longer than he had. When the doors opened into the underground garage, the air smelled faintly of concrete and rainwater. William's black SUV waited near the private exit, engine running, headlights glowing against the wet ramp. His driver, Malcolm, stepped out and opened the rear door, then paused when he saw the children. Malcolm had worked for William for 11 years and knew when not to ask questions. He simply softened his voice and said, "Good afternoon, ladies." Naomi gave him a cautious nod. Lily whispered, "Hello." Inside the SUV, the leather seats were warm, and the city sounded distant behind thick glass. William sat in the front passenger seat instead of beside them, giving the girls the whole back row with Grace. As the vehicle pulled into Manhattan traffic, gray buildings slid past, their windows streaked with rain. For several blocks, no one spoke. Then Naomi leaned close to Lily and murmured, "You do not have to remember the cards anymore." Lily looked at her. "What if I forget everything?" Naomi shrugged gently. "Then maybe what is real has room to come back." William heard it, and the words entered him quietly. He thought of all the things he had forced himself to forget after. Eleanor died because remembering made the house too loud. Her humming in the kitchen, her handwriting on grocery lists, the blue bracelet tapping against a teacup, the way she looked at him one rainy morning and said, "William, not every family arrives in the shape people expect." He had been halfway out the door, phone in hand, distracted by a hospital funding meeting in Boston. He had kissed her forehead without truly listening. Now, years later, the sentence returned with a child's face attached to it. "Mr. Harrington?" Lily asked from the back seat. "Yes." "Do you hate me now?" William turned so quickly Grace's eyes lifted. Lily looked small against the wide leather seat, swallowed by the coat around her shoulders. Her ribbons slightly loosened from the long afternoon. William felt the question pierce through all the legal language, all the family history, all the money and damage and fear. "No," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I do not hate you. I am sorry anyone made you think love had to be earned by pretending." Lily blinked, and for the first time all day, her breathing eased. Naomi looked out the window, but William saw her reflection in the glass. She was listening. "Naomi," he said carefully, "I owe you the same truth. I do not know yet what the records will prove. I do not know what Eleanor meant to do, or why people hid it. But I know this much. You should not have had to walk into that room alone to stop a lie." Naomi's reflection looked back at him. "I was not alone," she said. William glanced at Lily. Lily reached across the small space between them and placed her hand near Naomi's, not grabbing it, just offering. After a moment, Naomi let her fingers touch Lily's. The SUV crossed the bridge toward Brooklyn, rain thinning into mist. William's home in Brooklyn Heights was not the glass mansion reporters liked to photograph in magazines. It was an old brownstone Eleanor had loved, with black shutters, a blue front door, and a kitchen that looked out over a small garden. He had not slept there much since her death. The rooms held too many echoes. But as Malcolm parked at the curb and the porch light warmed the wet stone steps, William understood why he had chosen it without thinking. If the truth was going to enter his life, it should enter through the door Eleanor once painted blue with her own hands. Naomi stepped out of the SUV and looked up at the house. "You live here?" she asked. "Sometimes," William said. She studied the blue door. "It looks less lonely than your office." Grace almost smiled. William looked at the door, then at the two girls beside him. "It used to be," he said. Then he opened it and let them walk in first. The blue front door closed behind them with a sound softer than William expected, and for a moment the brownstone seemed to hold its breath. The entryway smelled faintly of cedar, rain-soaked coats, and the lemon oil Eleanor used to rub into the old banister every spring. A brass umbrella stand sat beside the wall. A pair of garden boots, untouched for years, remained beneath the bench as if Eleanor might come in from the backyard and ask why everyone looked so serious. Naomi noticed the boots first. Lily noticed the framed photographs on the staircase. Grace noticed William noticing both girls and said nothing. "Kitchen," William said quietly. "It is warmer there." They followed him down the hallway past a living room with covered furniture and shelves of books that had not been moved in years. The house was not dusty, because people were paid to keep it clean, but it felt preserved rather than lived in, like a museum with a heartbeat hidden somewhere behind the walls. The kitchen changed that. It was wide and old-fashioned, with white cabinets, a farmhouse sink, a round oak table, and windows looking out toward a narrow garden where wet leaves shone under the porch light. Eleanor had chosen the blue tile behind the stove. William remembered arguing that it was too bright. She had said a house needed at least one color brave enough to be happy. Now Naomi stood in front of that tile, her blue beads catching the kitchen light, and William had to look away. Grace set her folder on the table and began arranging documents into careful stacks. "I will keep working from here," she said. "Miss Carla is gathering photographs of the box." The agency director agreed to a direct call within the hour. Lily sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of warm milk that Mrs. Alvarez, the housekeeper, had quietly prepared after one look at the children. Naomi accepted hot chocolate, but did not drink it first. She watched the room, the exits, the adults, the way a child watches unfamiliar kindness before deciding whether it is real. William stood at the counter, unsure what to do with his own hands. He could command boardrooms and laboratories, but he did not know whether to offer marshmallows. Mrs. Alvarez solved it by placing a small bowl on the table and saying, "In this house, hot chocolate is supposed to have too many." Naomi looked at the marshmallows, then at Lily, and the smallest smile touched her face. "Too many sounds like a rule I understand." For the first time that day, Lily almost laughed. The sound was tiny, but it moved through the kitchen like a window opening. Grace's phone buzzed. She looked down, read, and her expression shifted. "William," she said. Miss Carla found a photograph of the box. She turned the phone toward him. The image showed a worn cardboard box on a plain bedspread. On the lid, in black marker, someone had written, "Nora Grace, personal effects. Hold until 18 unless guardian claims." William stared at the handwriting. The kitchen light seemed to dim around the edges. He knew that handwriting. Not Eleanor's. Edmund Pike's. "He wrote that," William said. "Pike." Grace nodded. "Yes." Naomi set her mug down carefully. "Who is he?" William pulled out the chair across from her and sat, because standing suddenly felt wrong. "He worked for my family after my wife died. He handled private records, estate matters, things I should have handled myself." "Why did he have my box?" Naomi asked. The question was direct, not accusing, and that made it harder to answer. "I do not know yet." Naomi looked at him until the silence required more. William exhaled. "But I should have known. That part is mine." Lily whispered. "Did Miss Eleanor give Naomi the bracelet?" William opened his hand. The bracelet lay there, the charm resting against his skin. "I think so." Grace's phone rang before anyone could speak. Again, she answered on speaker after asking the girls if it was all right. Naomi nodded. Lily did too. A woman's voice came through, warm and strained. "This is Carla Mendez." Naomi sat straighter. "Miss Carla." "Naomi, baby, are you safe?" Naomi's guarded face softened so quickly William felt it like a rebuke. "Yes, ma'am. I am with Miss Grace and Mr. Harrington. Lily is here too." "Good. Good." Miss Carla drew a breath. "I found the intake note. I should have pushed harder years ago, but they told me the family had complicated legal reasons. They said you were protected." Grace leaned forward. "Who told you that?" "A man named Edmund Pike. And later, a woman from an office. Sloan, I think. Victoria Sloan. She visited once, maybe 4 years ago, asking whether Naomi still had the bracelet." William went still. Naomi's eyes sharpened. "She knew about it before today?" Miss Carla's voice lowered. "Yes, honey. I am sorry." Lily looked down into her mug. "That is why she told me about it." Grace asked, "Miss Mendez, do you still have the sealed note?" There was a rustle of paper over the line. "Yes. I never opened it. It was marked for William Harrington only, but nobody came." Nobody came. William closed his eyes. The words did not accuse loudly. They did worse. They told the truth plainly. "Can you read the outside of the envelope?" Grace asked. Miss Carla hesitated. "It says, if William has forgotten how to listen, give this to Grace." Grace's face drained of color. "To me?" "Yes, ma'am." The kitchen changed again. The blue tile, the rain, the mugs, the children, all of it seemed to draw closer around Grace. William looked at her. "Did Eleanor leave something with you?" Grace shook her head slowly. Not knowingly. Her voice was thin now. But there were weeks after her final hospital project when she asked unusual questions. Guardianship without publicity. Private trusts for minors. Emergency placement if a family objected. William's pulse grew heavy. Family objected to what? Grace looked at Naomi, then at him. To a child who did not fit their idea of the Harrington name. Naomi's face did not change, but her hand closed around the edge of the table. William saw it. So did Lily, who quietly slid the bowl of marshmallows closer to her. Naomi glanced at it, surprised, and took one without speaking. It was such a small act, and somehow it hurt more than the documents. Miss Carla spoke again. "There are 2 photographs. One is Eleanor holding Naomi as a baby. The other has writing on the back." Grace asked, "What does it say?" Paper shifted. Miss Carla's voice trembled. "It says, her name is Nora Grace for now, but if she grows into another name, let her keep that too. She belongs to love, not to fear." No one moved. Naomi looked at William as if she wanted him to explain how a woman she did not remember could sound so close. William had no explanation. He only had a memory of Eleanor standing in this same kitchen, rain behind her, telling him some families arrived in shapes the world did not expect. He had not listened then. He would listen now. "Miss Carla," he said, leaning toward the phone. "Please keep everything safe. Grace will send a trusted courier, and no one else is to touch those records." "Yes, sir." "And Miss Carla," Naomi added, her voice smaller now. "Will I have to leave Lily?" Lily looked up quickly. Miss Carla was quiet for a second. "That is not for anyone to decide without listening to both of you." William looked at the two girls across his kitchen table, one tied to his past by a bracelet, the other freed from a lie by the courage to tell the truth. He understood then that this was no longer only about finding out who Naomi was. It was about deciding what kind of man he would become when the truth finally arrived at his door. Grace ended the call. Rain whispered against the garden windows. William placed the bracelet on the table between them, not claiming it, not hiding it, just letting it be seen. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will open the note together, with Miss Carla present by video, and with someone independent to protect both of you legally." Naomi looked at him. "Not tonight." "Not tonight," William said. "Tonight. No more adults pulling answers out of children." Lily took a slow breath. Naomi picked up her mug at last. The hot chocolate had cooled, but she drank it anyway. Outside, the storm thinned over Brooklyn, and inside Eleanor's kitchen, the first honest silence of the day settled around them like a blanket. Morning came to the Brooklyn brownstone in pale gold strips, touching the blue kitchen tile first, then the oak table, then the two folded blankets Mrs. Alvarez had placed over the backs of the chairs after Naomi and Lily had fallen asleep in the den. William had not slept. He had spent the night in the living room, not pacing, not drinking, not making calls, simply sitting beneath the covered shelves while the house breathed around him. Every hour seemed to return a different memory of Eleanor. Eleanor painting the front door blue in old jeans and laughing when the brush slipped. Eleanor arguing with a hospital administrator because a frightened child had been treated like a file number. Eleanor standing in the kitchen during a storm, one hand resting over the blue bracelet on her wrist, telling William that love was not real unless it protected the person who had the least power in the room. He had admired that sentence then. He had not understood that it was also a warning. By 8 o'clock, Grace Holloway had arrived in the same navy jacket from the day before, her eyes tired but clear. With her came an independent child advocate named Marisol Vega, a calm woman in her 40s with kind eyes, a gray wool coat, and a notebook she did not open until both girls gave permission. Miss Carla appeared on a video call from the Staten Island home, seated at a small desk with the worn cardboard box in front of her. Naomi sat between Lily and Mrs. Alvarez at the kitchen table, her braids newly tied with the same blue beads, her hands folded around a mug of warm cider. Lily had chosen the chair closest to Naomi. William noticed that neither girl had been asked to sit there. They had chosen each other. Grace placed Eleanor's bracelet in the center of the table, then nodded to the screen. "Miss Mendez, whenever you are ready." Miss Carla lifted the sealed envelope with both hands. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but Eleanor's handwriting on the front was unmistakable once William saw it. "Give this to Grace if William has forgotten how to listen." He almost smiled at the gentleness and pain of it. Eleanor had known him too well. Miss Carla opened the envelope carefully. Inside was one page, folded around a small photograph. Grace asked permission before reading aloud. Naomi looked at William, then at Marisol, then nodded. Lily whispered, "I want to hear it too." Grace unfolded the letter. Her voice trembled on the first line, then steadied. "Dear Grace, if you are reading this, then fear has outlived me longer than I hoped." The kitchen seemed to fall away. Even the city outside the garden wall grew quiet. Grace continued, "There is a child temporarily named Nora Grace. She is not a secret because she is shameful. She is a secret because powerful people confuse reputation with safety. Her mother trusted me at St. Agnes during a community health program, and when circumstances became impossible, I promised the baby would not disappear into a system without a witness." Naomi's fingers tightened around the mug. William stared at the table. Her mother, not Eleanor. Something inside him shifted, not away from Naomi, but toward a truth larger than the one he had imagined. Grace read on. William does not know yet. I wanted to tell him, but I have seen how his family speaks when bloodlines and names are mentioned. If I am gone before I can make this right, protect the child first. Tell William only when he is ready to choose compassion over inheritance, truth over image, and a child over the approval of people who never learned how to love without conditions. William lowered his head. There was no anger in the letter. That made it harder. Eleanor had not condemned him. She had hoped for him. Grace paused, then unfolded the photograph. It showed Eleanor in a hospital room by a rain-streaked window, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, were the words Miss Carla had read the night before. Her name is Nora Grace for now, but if she grows into another name, let her keep that too. She belongs to love, not to fear. Naomi looked at the photograph for a long time. Her face did not break. It opened slowly, like a door she was afraid might lead nowhere. That is me? She asked. Miss Carla's voice came softly through the tablet. Yes, baby. That is you. Naomi touched the screen, not the face of Eleanor, but the yellow blanket. Who was my mother? Grace looked down at the letter again. Eleanor wrote that your mother's name was Denise Brooks. Naomi blinked. Brooks? Yes, Grace said. That part of your name was real. Marisol leaned in gently. Naomi, this means there are records we can search properly now. It does not mean anyone gets to make decisions for you today. Naomi nodded, but her eyes had gone distant. Lily reached under the table and rested her hand beside Naomi's. Naomi let her fingers touch Lily's without looking away from the photograph. William felt a strange pain bloom in him, not the pain of losing a daughter he had imagined in one desperate night, but the pain of realizing Eleanor had left him a different gift, not ownership, not blood, but a chance to become worthy of trust. Grace continued reading. If Victoria Sloane or Edmund Pike are near this matter, be careful. Edmund believed he was protecting the Harrington family from scandal. Victoria believed she could turn any child into a story if the lighting was right. Neither of them understood that a child is not a symbol. Lily began to cry silently. William looked at her with sudden clarity. Victoria had not only hidden Naomi. She had selected Lily because Lily could be shaped into a public version of healing. Two children, different wounds, same lie. Lily, he said softly, look at me for a moment. She did. You are not a replacement for anyone. Not Eleanor. Not Naomi. Not a story. You are Lily. Her lips trembled. Then what happens to me? William glanced at Marisol, then Grace, then back at the child. We find the safest, kindest, most honest answer. And you are part of that answer. Not the object of it. Naomi finally lifted her eyes to him. And me? William took a breath. Every old Harrington instinct wanted to promise too much, too quickly, to build a solution with money and signatures because uncertainty felt unbearable. But Eleanor's letter sat between them like a hand on his shoulder, reminding him to listen first. You are Naomi. Brooks, he said. You may have once been Nora Grace. You were protected by Eleanor when others failed to understand why that mattered. And from this point forward, no one in my family, my company, or my name gets to decide who you are without you. Naomi studied him. Does that mean I am not your daughter? The question did not wound him the way he expected. It humbled him. It means I do not get to call you anything I have not earned. The answer settled over the table. Grace folded the letter with care. Miss Carla wiped her eyes on the video call. Mrs. Alvarez placed a plate of buttered toast near the girls without a word. Outside, sunlight slipped through the wet garden leaves. Naomi looked at the bracelet in the center of the table, then pushed it gently toward William. She wanted you to listen, she said. William looked at the bracelet, then at both girls. Then I will start now. By noon, the brownstone no longer felt like a house preserved for grief. It felt like a place where truth had finally been allowed to sit at the kitchen table and ask for breakfast. Grace Holloway worked from the dining room with Marisol Vega beside her, calling agencies, requesting sealed records, and placing every document into a chain that could not be quietly broken again. Miss Carla remained on video for nearly an hour, answering questions with the careful honesty of a woman who had protected what little she had been allowed to protect. William listened more than he spoke. It was harder than giving orders. Orders made the world move. Listening made the heart move, and his heart had been stiff for years. Naomi sat near the garden window with Eleanor's photograph in front of her, not holding it too tightly, not letting it go either. Lily sat beside her with colored pencils Mrs. Alvarez had found in an old drawer. At first, Lily drew nothing but straight lines. Then she drew the blue front door, then the kitchen table, then 2 mugs with 2 mini marshmallows floating on top. Naomi watched without comment until Lily added a tiny bracelet in the middle of the table. "That charm is too big," Naomi said. Lily looked worried. "Sorry. No, I mean if it is that big, it should have sparkles." Lily stared at her, then smiled. It was the first real smile William had seen from her, uneven and startled, like she had found it by accident. He turned away before either girl could see what it did to him. In the dining room, Grace placed a printed email in front of him. "The agency has suspended the signing and opened an internal review. Marisol has requested temporary protective oversight for both children until the records are verified. Nothing moves without the advocate's approval." William nodded. "And Victoria?" Grace's expression cooled. "Her office is not responding. Her assistant says she is unavailable." "She is not unavailable," William said. "She is calculating." "Then do not give her shadows to calculate in." Grace slid another paper toward him. "Make a clean statement to the board. No names of the children. No private history. No emotional language for public use. Say the adoption has been paused due to irregularities in documentation and that Harrington Global will cooperate with all appropriate reviews." William read the words. They were plain, legal, and mercifully empty of performance. Yesterday, he would have hated that. Yesterday, he would have wanted the narrative controlled before markets opened and donors called. Today, he looked through the doorway at Naomi and Lily sitting under the kitchen light, and he understood that the most honorable story was sometimes the one the public never got to own. "Send it," he said. Grace watched him carefully. "There will be consequences." "There should be." His phone began vibrating before the statement even left the house. Board members, public relations executives, foundation donors, a senator whose name looked suddenly small on the screen. William turned the phone face down. For once, the world could wait outside the blue door. Near the window, Naomi looked up. "Are people mad?" "Probably," William said. "Because of me?" "No." He crossed into the kitchen and sat across from her, leaving the photograph between them. "Because some adults prefer a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth." Naomi considered that. "Miss Carla says lies are like gum under a table. You can ignore it, but somebody is still going to touch it." Lily made a small sound that became a laugh, then covered her mouth as if laughter needed permission. William smiled before he could stop himself. "Miss Carla sounds wise." "She is," Naomi said. "She also makes terrible oatmeal." A softness settled over the kitchen, brief but real. Then Marisol entered with her notebook closed. "Naomi, Lily, I want to explain what happens next in words that belong to you, not just to the adults." Both girls turned toward her. William stayed silent. "No one is being adopted today. No one is being returned anywhere today without a safety review. Naomi, your records will be searched with your knowledge. Lily, your records will be corrected, not blamed on you. You both have the right to ask questions, to say you are tired, and to have an adult who is not part of the Harrington family speak for your needs." Lily asked, "Can Naomi and I stay in the same place tonight?" Marisol looked at Grace, then at William. "That depends on what is safest and approved." Naomi's face closed a little. William wanted to promise yes. The word rose in him, warm and reckless. But he caught it. "No more beautiful promises before truth. We will ask properly," he said, "and we will tell you honestly." Lily nodded slowly. Naomi looked at him a little longer, as if measuring the difference between a promise and respect. The doorbell rang then, sharp through the quiet house. Mrs. Alvarez appeared in the hallway, frowning. Malcolm's voice followed from the entryway, low and firm. "Mr. Harrington, Miss Sloane is here." The kitchen changed. Lily's pencil stopped moving. Naomi's hand moved toward the photograph. William stood, but Marisol lifted one hand. "The girls do not need to see her unless they choose to." "I do not want to," Lily whispered. Naomi looked at Lily first, then said, "Me neither." William nodded. "Then you will not." He walked to the hallway with Grace beside him. Victoria stood just inside the entry, rain shining on her white coat, her hair perfect despite the weather. She looked past William toward the kitchen, but Grace stepped into her line of sight. "You cannot be here," Grace said. Victoria's smile was thin. "I came to prevent William from destroying himself." William felt no anger then, only clarity. You came because the story moved without you. Her eyes flashed. I protected your name. You used children to decorate it. That is unfair. No, William said. It is incomplete. The review will finish the sentence. Victoria lowered her voice. Think very carefully. If this becomes public, Eleanor's choices become public too. For 1 second, the old fear touched him, not fear for himself, but fear of the world taking Eleanor's compassion and twisting it into gossip. Then he heard Naomi in the kitchen, quietly telling Lily that sparkles should be blue, and the fear lost its authority. Eleanor's choices can stand in the light, he said. Can yours? Victoria's face changed. It was small, but it was enough. Grace opened the front door. Rain blew softly across the threshold. All future communication goes through counsel, Grace said. Victoria looked at William one last time, searching for the man who once let others manage grief for him. He was gone. The door closed, and the house exhaled. When William returned to the kitchen, both girls looked up. He did not tell them everything. He did not need to. She is gone, he said. Naomi studied his face. For now. William placed Eleanor's bracelet back in the center of the table. For now? But this time, the truth is not alone. Lily picked up the blue pencil again. Naomi leaned closer to the drawing. Outside, rain began once more, gentle against the windows, but inside the brownstone, no one rushed to hide from it. 3 weeks later, the blue front door stood open to an afternoon full of clean spring light. The storm that had carried Naomi and Lily into William Harrington's life had passed long ago, but the house had not returned to the quiet museum it had been before. Shoes now sat by the entryway in imperfect pairs. A yellow raincoat hung beside William's dark wool overcoat. Colored pencils lived in a ceramic bowl on the kitchen table. The blue tile behind the stove no longer looked like the bravest color in an empty room. It looked like it had been waiting. The investigations were not finished because truth, real truth, moved slower than rumors. Edmund Pike had agreed to speak through counsel. Victoria Sloan was no longer connected to the Harrington Foundation, the adoption process, or the family office. The agency had admitted irregularities in Lily's file, and St. Agnes had released enough protected records to confirm that Eleanor Harrington had served as temporary guardian for an infant once called Nora Grace, whose mother, Denise Brooks, had asked that her daughter be kept safe until a permanent plan could be made. There were still gaps. There were still questions. There were names Grace was chasing through courts and archives and hospital basements. But the largest lie had lost its roof. It could no longer shelter anyone. That afternoon, William sat at the oak kitchen table with Grace Holloway on one side and Marisol Vega on the other. No photographers waited in the hallway. No public relations team had arranged flowers. No statement had been drafted. On the table were 2 thin folders, not the thick, polished packets Victoria had once prepared, but plain working files labeled with the girls' names. Lily sat near the garden window, drawing a brownstone with a blue door and 2 uneven stick figures standing beneath it. Naomi sat across from William, the bracelet resting between them. She had chosen not to wear it every day anymore. Sometimes it stayed in a small velvet box Grace had given her. Sometimes it sat in the kitchen where everyone could see it. Naomi said important things should be allowed to rest too. William had not argued. He was learning that not every silence needed to be filled by him. Marisol closed her notebook and looked at the girls first, not at William. Here is what we know today. Lily, your placement review has been corrected. You are no longer attached to a false identity file. Naomi, your personal records are being restored under your legal name, with your earlier name preserved as part of your history, not as a replacement for who you are now. No permanent decision will be made today. Lily nodded, serious and relieved at the same time. Naomi looked at William. So nobody is signing anything? William almost smiled. Not today. Good, Naomi said. Last time there were papers, everyone got weird. Grace laughed softly, then covered it with a cough that fooled no one. Lily smiled into her drawing. William looked down at his hands. They had signed mergers, term sheets, medical grants, and buildings into existence. But they had also hovered above papers that could have turned 2 children into a lie. He understood now that a signature was not love. At best, it was a promise written after love had already learned how to listen. Mrs. Alvarez brought out grilled cheese sandwiches cut diagonally, because Lily had said triangles tasted better and Naomi had agreed only after testing both shapes with great seriousness. William took one plate and placed it in front of Lily, then another in front of Naomi. She looked up at him. You remembered extra pickles. I was instructed that forgetting them would be a major failure. It would have been, Naomi said, but her mouth curved at the corner. The afternoon settled around them, warm and ordinary, and the ordinariness felt almost miraculous. After lunch, Grace left for court filings, and Marisol stepped into the living room to return a call. Lily went to the garden with Mrs. Alvarez to check whether the tomato seedlings had survived the rain. Naomi stayed at the table, tracing one finger around the edge of the bracelet charm. William remained across from her, giving her the choice to speak or not. At last she said, "Do you miss her every day?" William looked toward the blue tile. "Yes." "Does it get smaller?" He thought about lying gently, then chose not to. "Not exactly, but it changes shape. Some days it feels like a locked room. Some days it feels like a window." Naomi considered that. Today, William looked at the kitchen, the drawings, the open garden door, Lily's voice floating in from outside as she announced that one seedling looked dramatic but alive. "Today it feels like a window." Naomi nodded, as if that answer had passed some private test. She pushed the bracelet toward him. "You can keep it for a while." William did not touch it yet. "Are you sure?" "Yes, but not forever." "That sounds fair. And not in a safe." He looked at her. "Where then?" Naomi glanced around the kitchen and pointed to the windowsill above the sink, where sunlight gathered in a bright square. "There. She liked rain, right? She should get sun too." William picked up the bracelet carefully and placed it on the windowsill. The charm caught the light, and for a moment the engraved letters shone against the blue tile, not like a clue anymore, not like evidence, but like a small piece of love finally allowed to stop hiding. Lily came back inside with dirt on one sleeve and pride on her face. "The tomatoes are not dead." "Excellent," William said. "A strong legal victory for the tomatoes," Grace called from the hallway, having returned for a folder she forgot. Lily laughed, and Naomi laughed with her. The sound filled the kitchen so naturally that William had to take a breath and let it pass through him. Later, as evening softened Brooklyn into gold, the four of them sat on the back steps with paper cups of lemonade. Malcolm waited by the gate, pretending not to smile. Mrs. Alvarez watered the garden even though it had rained enough for a week. Grace stood near the door speaking quietly with Marisol about next steps, safe steps, honest steps. Naomi leaned back on her hands and looked up at William. "What happens after all the records are fixed?" "We keep listening," he said. "That is not a plan. It is the beginning of one." Lily turned to him. "And dinner?" William looked at the two girls, at the blue door behind them, at Eleanor's kitchen glowing warmly through the window. He thought of the man he had been in the law office, 1 inch away from signing a lie because it came dressed as healing. Then he looked at Naomi, who had walked into that room with nothing but courage and the truth, and at Lily, who had found the strength to stop pretending. "Dinner," he said, "is something we can plan." Naomi stood and brushed off her jeans. "Then we should start there." William opened the back door and let them go in ahead of him. The bracelet shone on the windowsill. The papers remained unsigned. And for the first time in years, the Harrington house did not feel unfinished. It felt like a family choosing one honest moment at a time to begin.